We've been spending a lot of time talking about innovation and the spirit of entrepreneurship and where that impacts our organization. Rob, give us your definition of entrepreneurship and explain what the corporate entrepreneur is.
Entrepreneurs are typically associated with the independent entrepreneur who breaks out on his or her own and builds a team and maybe raises some money and becomes the next Steve Jobs. But that view of the entrepreneur is limited. There are entrepreneurial people inside corporations. I call them corporate entrepreneurs. They're the people who see a vision and then spend the time, the work, the dedication to make it happen. And that could be an independent entrepreneur. It could be in a corporation, a different kind of, different species of entrepreneur, if you will. But it can also be in a government, or it could be in a nonprofit. There are great entrepreneurs who've started nonprofit organizations. Now, in the classic sense of building an enterprise in order to make money, which is the original definition of entrepreneur, that we're not talking about that. But we are talking about someone who's trying to create value in the world in some way, whether that's money or social change or whatever. And entrepreneurship, I believe, should span across all of these sectors. And we as a society need to support people to see their vision and pursue it. And that's what I mean when I talk about entrepreneurship.
So, you know, we talked about a couple of the classic entrepreneurs, but are entrepreneurs born or are they made?
I tend to think that there's a lot of nuance to that discussion because, look, there are some people that you can just feel it. There are other people, for the most part, in the universe. There are people who are more or less suited to being an entrepreneur. Some who absolutely should just keep their day job and never even think about it, right? But there are a whole lot of people who have some skills, who have things to offer, who could become very successful entrepreneurs or be entrepreneurial in various aspects of their lives. So I believe that there are some people who are born to be and others who can be made, and some who should just kind of stick with the 9 to 5.
Watch the show.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about project managers. Are project managers born or made?
There are some things that you have some natural inclination towards, one of which you have to be unafraid of change because things are going to always change. Now, on the other side of that, you must crave stability and predictability. So it seems odd because you want predictable execution of a program as a project, but you have to do that in an environment that is constantly changing. Yeah. They can be made somewhat because in education you can learn the technical skills and so forth, and that's what I teach my class, but then you have to marry the learning, the theory and so forth to the actual application, being able to say what applies in the real world. So if you have that inclination, I'm not afraid, I don't mind change, but I like control, you have the genesis of it. One of the most important skills though for a project manager is communication. It's not the technical things. You have to be a great communicator. You have to sell your product, constantly sell, you have to negotiate for resources with the project team members and so forth. But they can be developed. They're not born, so to speak.
Especially engineers and scientists and people who are thinking the big thoughts and coming up with the great stuff. It sometimes burns them to no end when I say, you know what, innovation, entrepreneurship, it's about sales. It's a constant effort of communicating with people all over the company, with selling the project, protecting the project, moving things forward, and then once you're in the market, selling the heck out of the product or the service or whatever it is. So it kind of annoys the purists, but the fact of the matter is if you can't convince people to come on board, to provide resources, to buy the product, then you don't have a business.
Actually, the project managers should sit between the technical team and the people actually doing the work. Not to mean that project managers don't work, just different work, but they should sit between the technical team and the sponsors and the other people, and to bridge that gap. That's their role, to sell that. That's why communication is just vital for a project manager.
I mean, what are some of the tenets that industry needs to look at now in terms of viewing the entrepreneur differently, internal or external, and also the impact of innovation? Any thoughts on that?
Well, you said industry, and I think the industry is key, but it really is a cross-sector challenge. We can't expect business by itself to make these things happen if they're being restricted by government in various ways. We need to recognize that there are critical opportunities for business and government to work together to support innovation and entrepreneurship. We as a country, and other countries as well, have to become more coordinated and focused on not only providing the context within which business can make these kinds of longer-term bets, but also recognizing the government has a continued role to play to make the investments that businesses won't be able to make in the long run technologies and capabilities. So they're just things that we shouldn't expect businesses to make investments in things that might not make it to market for 15 years, but government can do that.
Well, actually, that's one of the points in this stimulus package that came out from the Economic Council is there's $100 billion set aside to help jumpstart innovation in this country. And it speaks to a larger issue about funding innovation. And I'd like to take that and segue into how organizations manage, or what the models of the corporate entrepreneurship model in a company is, and how funding relates to that. So Rob, give us a sense of how that breaks out.
So the two dimensions we use to organize this are, one is, as you mentioned, resources, resource authority. Does an organization somewhere in the company, or maybe multiple organizations, not just one, does an organization or organizations have a dedicated pot of money that they're to invest in innovation opportunities, new business creation, et cetera? Or is it more ad hoc? The other factor we saw that differentiates these approaches is organizational responsibility, organizational accountability. So is there a group, or are there groups within your company that have the specific responsibility to build new businesses or to change the way the business currently operates, what have you? Or is it just distributed across the whole firm? Anybody can be involved in it that wants to, and often that means that nobody's involved in it, right? So when you look at who has organizational responsibility, who has the money to make it happen, you end up with a simple 2x2 matrix. On one corner you have what we call the opportunist. This is what all companies are before they get deliberate about it. It's just what I said before, you going to work every day and trying to find a Ken who's going to stand up with you and make this happen. Where companies have been going over the past 10 years, really since the dot-com boom and crash, is to becoming more intentional about new business creation. And this has spawned three very different models that have different processes, different kinds of approaches to management, to project management, and even, this is the rub, the crux, different objectives.
So if a lot of businesses start out in that opportunistic model,
Sure.
where do they evolve to from there?
That's a great question, and as we said before, all companies are opportunistic by nature until they become deliberate about trying to build new businesses or really change the company in various ways. And so the answer to your question is, what is your objective, or what are your objectives? And this is a question that a lot of companies fail to ask properly and answer early on in the process. The innovation organizations that succeed, that at least from our experience, what we've seen, which is many cases, are the ones that had one or two specific objectives up front, and they built their whole organization around achieving those objectives. So, if my objective is to create brand new businesses for the company, then I probably need a dedicated team of people, and I probably need my own pot of money, because these sometimes might be disruptive businesses. So going to a business unit to get co-investment, that's going to be tough, right? They might fit between different business units, so those business units might want to see it happen, but they have a disincentive to invest because that comes off their bottom line. Sure. On the other hand, if you're interested in helping established business units change the way they operate or fight commoditization or what have you, then you probably want a group of people who are a little bit different. They're the people who are great at, as you said before, communicating. They're sort of like internal consultants. They understand how innovation happens. They understand strategy, but they can work with business units to help them solve their problems. They can sell a value proposition, develop and sell a value proposition with business unit leaders, because in the case of what we call the advocate model, they're a very peculiar case because it almost sounds like a road to nowhere. Because here's a dedicated team whose job it is to help the business change the way it operates. Absolutely. But they have no budget. But it works great at companies that make it work. It is fabulous, because what you have then is a small group of people with no pet projects, because they don't have enough money to fund those pet projects, who have to go out across the business to find partners, to find business unit leads, functional leads who are willing to co-invest in these projects to make things happen.